Tropical Storm Nicole, a broad system as expected following the NHC's forecast track west, heading right to Florida with hurricane warnings now in effect on the East Coast. We're live in your hurricane headquarters on Tracking the Tropics to break down the latest models and to answer your questions on Facebook Live. Hey there, folks. JB here with you again in your hurricane headquarters on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing, alongside our two experts on the right side of your screen, WFLA Chief Meteorologist Jeff Baradelli, meteorologist Rebecca Barry here on the Max Defender 8 weather team. They are standing by to answer your questions. We had so many that we couldn't get to yesterday, so this is an opportunity now for us to answer your questions out of the Facebook Live comment section, provided they have one of the hashtags you see on your screen, hashtag Hey Jeff, hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey JB. We'll come back to that Q&A in just a moment, but I want to send things over to the wall for meteorologist Rebecca Barry to take us through what the latest is with now Tropical Storm Nicole. Rebecca.
So Nicole did make that transition from subtropical to tropical, and the main difference is the center temperature. So subtropical systems have a cold core, tropical systems have a warm core. So now that it has made that transition, as it's moving over these warm waters, it can use that as fuel and energy. And so we might start to see more tropical characteristics because of how elongated the system is. You can see all the convection kind of away from the center of the storm. That's more of a subtropical characterization. We may see more symmetry trying to form as it gets a little bit stronger, more of a tropical characteristic of a system. Also, subtropical systems often have the highest wind speeds well away from the center, whereas tropical systems have those highest wind speeds right along the eye wall. So we'll have to see how much of a transition and how many characteristics Nicole is able to gather as it starts to move over the warmer waters. And so this is where Nicole is right now, starting to see the outermost rain bands moving closer to the east coast of Florida. The center of the system is still approaching the Bahamas at this point as a tropical storm. As far as the track goes, it made a slight shift to the north today, and we expected some changes, especially since the center just formed yesterday. It usually takes a model run or two once the center actually forms to get a better idea of where the system is headed. Currently looking at 60-mile-per-hour winds, expected to cross that Category 1 threshold as it moves past the Bahamas and starts to approach the coastline of the east coast of Florida. And so remember, when you're looking at this track, and we saw this with Ian, it is so important to not focus on the center of the track, because the track is for where the center of the storm could be. It could be as far north, making an impact closer to Melbourne. It could be as far south, making an impact, the center of the storm making an impact as low as south as West Palm. But the storm itself is much, much, much bigger than this. And a lot of the highest winds and a lot of the rain are to the north of the center of rotation at this point. So that's another thing to keep in mind. That minimum central pressure right now, 992 millibars. It's moving to the west at 9 miles per hour. And so that track shift does mean that we're probably only going to see tropical storm force winds 30 to 50 miles per hour along the west coast of Florida. It's going to make its way across the state as a tropical storm. It does look like some forecast models bring it out over the Gulf just a little bit more into the Panhandle. Some of the forecast models turn it a little bit more sharply to the north and move it into Georgia a little bit more quickly. This position is for 7 p.m. on Thursday. And so right now conditions to start to deteriorate across Florida Wednesday. They get the peak of the system between Wednesday night into Thursday morning. By Thursday, it's starting to speed up its forward motion, especially Thursday night into Friday across southeastern Georgia. And then as a rainmaker, it lifts very quickly across the northeastern part of the United States. And so it will still be a rainmaker for them, but it's moving so fast. I'm not worried about some of that Carolina flooding that we sometimes get when we get a ton of rain up in the mountains. That's sometimes a concern, especially when the storms stall out. This one's lifting out pretty quickly. Let's talk about the tropical alerts. The red is where the hurricane warning is in effect right now. The pink is the hurricane watch. Once you make your way inland, we've got a tropical storm warning through Orlando. But for the Tampa Bay area, we're still under a tropical storm watch at this point. And so that's the good news. When we're talking about sea surface temperatures, this is really important for this storm to make that transition to a tropical storm as opposed to a subtropical storm, so it can feed off that energy of the warmer sea surface temperatures. A lot of the forecast models bring it a little bit further north than what the actual track is showing right now across the Bahamas. And so we'll have to see if that trend continues or if this is just an anomaly that that group of forecast models is picking up on. But you can see the spaghetti models making that turn across Florida. Pretty tight consensus for such an odd path for it to take. When we take a look at the European versus the GFS, the Euro is in green, the GFS is in red. Both systems in very tight agreement as it nears the Bahamas, and both in pretty tight agreement as it starts to cross the state as well. The GFS just a touch faster and a touch further south. The Euro just a little slower and a little more to the north. They start to disagree a little bit more on this turn, whether it goes out into the Gulf and then makes the sharp turn, or makes the sharp turn more and stays over the land, and then starts to lift out across the southeastern Georgia part of the coastline, and maybe starting to interact with the warm waters of the Atlantic there as well. And so when you take a look at the two track scenarios, because right now that track is very wide, including almost the entire state of Florida at this point, we've got the northernmost track and the southernmost track, and there are differences that our area would feel whether it takes that more northern track or that more southern track. So let's talk about it. If it were to take the more northerly track, that would be more indicative of a stronger storm. A lot of times they turn a little bit more sharply, but we would see weaker winds with only 20 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts, 1 to 3 inches of rain locally for the Tampa Bay area. We could see some of the higher rainfall totals over our inland counties. We're talking Polk and Highlands and Hardee and DeSoto. There, we would see a very minimal tornado threat if this track were to be realized, but we would see a bit higher than normal high tides. Nothing like what they're going to see across the East Coast with those astronomical high tides. But if it were to take the more southern part of the track, now here's what the local Tampa Bay impact area would see. We would see some stronger winds with this, but nothing terrible, just that 40 to 50 mile per hour range. 3 to 6 inches of rain. We would have a low threat for tornadoes, but not non-existent. And we would see higher tides Thursday evening. And so we would feel more of the storm if it took the more southern track. We would feel less of the storm if it took the more northern track. And we don't have a lot in this storm's way. Jeff and I were just talking about a lot of this wind shear on the wind shear graphic is the wind shear that the storm itself is creating because it's a low pressure. It's creating that wind shear. And so it's not battling it, it's creating it. So there's not much to stand in the way of this system intensifying into a Category 1 storm before it makes impact along the east coast of Florida. This map shows you when you might start to see tropical storm force winds, which are 39 mile per hour plus winds. Severe winds are considered above 60. That's in orange there. And hurricane force winds are 74. That'll be in red when they start to appear. And so we'll start to see some tropical storm force winds Wednesday morning along the east coast of Florida. Throughout the day, the winds will pick up across the state. By Wednesday afternoon, our inlandmost counties of the Tampa Bay area are seeing those 39 mile per hour or more winds. And those winds creep further out towards our coastline. Almost all of our areas starting to feel tropical storm force winds Wednesday after sunset. Severe winds enter the east coast of Florida in the middle of the night, early Thursday morning, while our area is still seeing less than 60 mile per hour winds, but more than 39 mile per hour winds. And then as we make our way through the day on Thursday, we may get scraped by some severe winds in Polk County mainly, but the rest of us are just going to stay in that 39 to 60 mile per hour range, and the winds start to lift out of our area Thursday afternoon into Thursday evening. And at that point, they're making their way across southeastern Georgia and then starting to lift out very quickly. So your wind gust forecast does show that we may see some downed limbs and some messy yards, but I don't think we're going to see widespread power outages from these winds. They're in that 20 to 35 mile per hour range for the duration of the system passing by our area, especially Wednesday night. That's when the winds start to pick up. We'll probably get in that 30, 40 mile per hour range as we make our way into early Thursday morning, and that's the closest that the system will be to our area during the early morning hours on Thursday. And the winds do start to go down Thursday evening, so we'll have a pretty windy day on Thursday. The main wave heights will all be on the east coast of Florida. We're not going to see much from it at all along the west coast of Florida, but it will create prolonged flooding. And so along the east coast of Florida, what happens when these lows start to approach is that they get onshore winds days out. They're already getting very strong onshore winds. They're already seeing tides higher than normal because of the moon phase, as well as those onshore winds. So less water goes out with each low tide and more water and higher water comes in with each high tide. So the high tides build, and their high tides will peak on Thursday along the east coast of Florida. Those wave heights peaking offshore in that 15-foot range, closer to shore in the 5 to 10-foot range. We're finally going to get some onshore winds as the storm passes by, and we're talking Friday afternoon. This is when we'll see our higher than normal high tides because of onshore winds as that system pushes away from our area. And so when we talk about rainfall totals, we have had some dry times. This is not like Ian, where we're rolling out of rainy season with very saturated grounds. We've had some really dry weeks, and so this will actually help a lot of our area, especially since we're not in the severe range. And so it's just to the east of us in that 3 to 4 to 5 inches of rain that they may see across the east coast, which would of course be flooding for anyone. But what we're going to see is probably that 1 to 3 inches of rain, with the heaviest over our inland areas. And so as we keep an eye on the rainfall totals, we'll keep adjusting them as we expect to see that more northerly or that southerly track. But all in all, this is not going to be a major impact for the Tampa Bay area. And for that, of course, we are grateful. We're watching those higher impacts along the east coast of Florida. They're probably going to see some prolonged flooding, especially in those more swollen rivers like the St. Johns River had some after effects from Ian, just now getting to those more normal levels. And a lot of the watershed for that area drains into that 1 or 2 rivers beds. And so it will create some extended flooding for them.
I want to get right to the questions and comments because we got a lot of them coming in, and we're going to start here with the perhaps most pressing question for the east coast of Florida. Guys, if you've been with us here before, you know how this works. You can use a hashtag to ask a question in our Facebook Live comment section, and we start here with Jenny, hashtag KJB, what/where is landfall projection? So we were just talking about, you made it very clear, Rebecca, in your forecast about that northerly versus southerly track option. Jeff, what do we say for Jenny in our comment section?
Well, the middle of the cone for the National Hurricane Center seems to be around Fort Pierce or Vero Beach, which is slightly further north than it was yesterday. It was closer to around Jupiter and Stewart. With all that said, there's, in my mind at least, and I've seen some other meteorologists debating it too, there's 2 camps of models here. The global models, which are the GFS, the European model, which Rebecca showed, in agreement on kind of a southern edge of the cone kind of track. Whereas the hurricane models are further north, and they're closer to Cape Canaveral. There's a big difference between the two. So which do you believe? Do you believe the global models, or do you believe the hurricane models? Just from a steering perspective, I tend to believe the global models, because the system is not really deeply in the tropics. It's right on the edge of the tropics. And this time of year, as we get towards wintertime, that's really the mid-latitudes, because it's no longer truly tropical season anymore. And the steering is really controlled by the weather systems like the jet stream and areas of high pressure that are up north. So my bet is it goes just slightly south of where some of the other models are going. If you look at the whole suite of computer models, hurricane models, the spaghetti plots, it's closer to Cape Canaveral. It theoretically should be south of that, just because the better steering models, which are the global models, probably should have a better handle on this. But then again, Rebecca may disagree, and a reason to disagree with me on that might be that if it's a stronger storm. If it's a stronger storm, they tend to go a little further north. So which kind of wins out? I don't know. Rebecca, what do you think?
I prefer the global models for steering. I think that the hurricane models do a much better job with intensity and what the storm may be battling itself, but not a good job with what some of the outside influences may be. And so I tend to agree with you that it will probably end up taking the more southerly track. And the wild card there is if it does form a little bit more quickly and a little bit stronger than we think.
Yeah, exactly right. So anyway, the answer to that question is, right now, Fort Pierce seems like or Vero Beach seems like a probable place, but that would probably put the strongest winds, by the way, right on top of Cape Canaveral anyway.
Tony Lee, an area you know well, Rebecca.
Yes.
What effects will Jacksonville have?
I have answered this question a lot in the last 24 hours. Still have tons of friends in Jacksonville. And so Jacksonville's conditions will start to deteriorate Wednesday night moving into Thursday morning. You're going to get gusty rain bands moving onshore. They'll become more close together and with less breaks in the wind. You're going to continue to see increasingly high tides. I'm worried about A1A down in Flagler County, where we had some washout with the last couple of storms. I think you're probably going to have the water over A1A in a lot of your more southern locations. I think you're going to be fine. Was looking at some of the projections. It looks about 8 inches higher than what you saw with Ian's flooding along the St. Johns River, if everything holds true. And so I think you're not looking at a Dorian. I think you're looking at closer to an Ian level of flooding along the St. Johns River and with storm surge as well.
How about this? You ready for this question? Watch this. This is pretty wild. Tyler Walsh, hashtag HeyJB from the WFLA Facebook page. I'm getting married in downtown Tampa on Saturday. Lots of family flying in from the Northeast on Thursday, you guys. What can we expect for safe travels? Can they expect delays or problems with their travel specifically on Thursday, Jeff?
I mean, I don't think the airport will be closed, and but I never know what the human reaction to storm. I can tell you what the weather's going to be. I can't tell you exactly how humans may react to that. What I mean is, will officials cancel a lot of flights? Will the airlines cancel flights? But it's going to be tough getting to Tampa on Thursday. Turbulence.
Yeah, I think the prop planes will be canceled, like the Silver Airlines and those smaller airlines. I'm hoping that the bigger flights won't be canceled.
But the question is it because you want to save money on the weddings? Less people are coming, or just kidding?
Good or bad?
Just kidding, right?
My poor
Could be
cousins
either
are
way.
getting married in Georgia outside on Saturday night.
Oh, that's gonna be tough.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one.
Yeah.
We've got a few more.
But I should say, weather for your wedding day, spectacular in Tampa on Saturday.
Breezy and
Spectacular.
cool. Yeah.
So don't mind my crazy comment about whether or not you really want your family to get here.
Always appears to be a silver lining, right?
Right.
How about this comment from Marguerite? It's one word with a question mark. Tornadoes?
Not many. There will be some on the north side of the system, especially, which essentially is the messy side of the system this time, right? It's the stronger side because that's the onshore part of the storm where the winds are coming in that way. So, but I don't think we'll see many in the Tampa Bay area, at least, just because we should be on the southern end. Could there be one or two or three? Yeah, that's possible.
We'll go to, we've got a lot of questions coming in from some different Facebook pages from across, of course, Next Our Nation. So we'll go to Christian next in our comment section. Christian wants to know, how will the rain and winds look here in southeastern Virginia? Christian joining us from the Wavy Facebook page.
Well, I'm going to have to actually look because honestly, when it
We're
comes
so
to Virginia,
hyper-focused on
we are
Florida
focused
at the
on Florida.
moment.
But with all that said, there's going to be a coastal front that sets up. Coastal fronts are interesting because as hurricanes make their way up the coast, they set up a convergent boundary and it rains all on the coast. And some of the worst weather ends up being in these coastal fronts. So, Rebecca, have you looked at all beyond like Florida?
I looked through the Carolinas because I was worried about the flooding concern there, and it's moving so fast
moving
over those areas. That's the good news. This is about the time it turns on the gas, so to speak, in terms of forward movement. So this is about 2 a.m. on Thursday into Friday morning, and then it really starts to speed up its forward motion. So any winds or rains that you do see would be very fast moving, and so a briefer duration for Virginia. I think you may see some 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts from what I saw. I was breaking it down for Raleigh, which is not too far from you guys, Raleigh, North Carolina. And I was looking at the possibility of like a 25 to 30-mile-per-hour wind gust.
Jenny Rogers from the WMBB Facebook page on the Panhandle. #HeyJB, will we see any rain in the Panama City area?
Yes, and so you'll get some rain in Panama City. It won't be as heavy as what we're going to see along the east coast of Florida. I would think you could pick up an inch in Panama City. I think that would be fair.
We'll go back local. With this is a great question because, of course, it's going to really, Polk County is definitely going to be impacted. There's no doubt. Jolene wants to know if Polk County likelihood that they're going to close school.
Thursday, I think it's possible. I mean, the biggest impact is going to be Wednesday night through the first half of Thursday, right, Rebecca? I mean,
Absolutely.
that's pretty okay.
Yeah.
So, I think it is possible they could close school. There's going to be a tropical storm warning for Polk County during that time, probably. And so, are they really going to send school buses out? Are they going to want children waiting for the school buses? I don't think so. But again, I always have a hard time predicting how humans, how political bodies, are going to react to things. So, but I do think that it's possible that school will be closed. What do you think, Rebecca?
It's probable in the cases because they have to create. Sometimes they close some schools down just because they use those schools as a special needs shelter for people that are medically dependent on electricity. And so the county has a responsibility to make sure those people have a place to go that will have electricity. So sometimes it's not necessarily the weather that closes the schools, but the need to protect the weaker portions of the population that we need to protect. And so sometimes that's a big factor. I think it would be a hard turnaround with Election Day because a lot of public facilities are used for voting today. And so it's kind of a hard turnaround for the city officials.
Right. Up north, and I'll mention this really quickly, in places like New York City, they rarely ever close public schools because kids rely on the meals. So they can get 1.5 feet of snow, and they really don't like closing those public schools because the kids won't have a meal that day.
Yeah.
Pokemon Mel, Sarasota?
Not much. Not much.
Yeah.
Outer bands, some quick moving squalls, gusts to maybe 35, miles an hour. That sounds about right. Maybe an inch of rain.
Let's go to Myrtle Beach, WBTW. Janice Robinson on that Facebook page. #Hey Jeff, what is Saturday looking like? Medieval Fest happening. Got tickets for Medieval Fest, man. You gotta have nice weather for Medieval Fest.
Batten down the medieval decorations.
But
Rebecca mentioned, everything's moving quick. It actually, and this is Myrtle Beach. So, I mean, according to the European model I'm looking at right now, everything's done in Myrtle Beach on Saturday morning. So it should be nice. Let me just look at one more. Let me just look at a different model to kind of see if that's showing anything different. And it doesn't look like it. Hang on a second here. Here we are, Saturday. Yep, no, it's looking good. it's looking good. Should be clearing out. Yeah.
Let's go to this comment from Elisa Bauman. Hashtag, hey, Rebecca, how likely power outages in Florida? Are they reaching out for help with linemen from other states? And this is stuff that always is going on behind the scenes because power outages are to be expected. It's just a matter of how widespread and how prevalent the problem is, right?
I don't think that a lot of the power outages are going to be much past I-95 on the East Coast. I think that the power outages will be more concentrated along the East Coast, along that first row of counties, maybe half a county in beyond that. The winds are just not going to be as widespread. A lot of the power outages will be to the north of where the eye makes landfall because that's where the strongest of the winds and the rain are right now. And so it's just not going to be one of those Ian situations where we have counties and counties without power, in my opinion, just because of the strength of the storm and how fast it starts moving.
This is a last call for your questions and comments. Jeff, do you want to mention something?
No.
Okay, sorry. I thought I cut you off. Last call for your hashtag, hey, Jeff, Rebecca, JB, questions and comments. Another 4 or 5 before we got to get going.
You see
get
that,
back
JB?
to work.
That's a huge wind field.
Oh, look at that.
It's like 600 miles across. It's
that's
really, really big.
It's massive.
That's the difference between a purely tropical system and subtropical. It's tropical now because it's building its core, but in reality, it still kind of has subtropical characteristics, and a lot of the winds being produced not by the storm, but by the pressure gradient between high pressure in the Great Lakes and this storm. And that tropical storm force wind, shield is huge. But that's why it's not likely to be a really strong storm because it spreads its energy out over a much bigger distance. So you end up with widespread moderate impacts rather than extremely focused, intense impacts. Very different than a storm like Ian, let's say.
That's a big yellow blob. And it
really
looks
big.
like it could swallow the entirety of this of the state of Florida. I mean, just absolutely massive. Let's go to the next question and comment in our comment section. Again, final call. Devin's joining us from the WKRG Facebook page over in Alabama, nowhere remotely close to Alabama. Now, there is this hook that is expected to happen. And really, right now, all the forecast models have been spot on with Nicole.
They've been very concise. And so the Floribama line may get a rain band or two, but that's about it. You're not going to see those tropical storm force winds get anywhere near, very close to Alabama. That's right there is about the closest that you'll get. And you can see that's Tallahassee. And so you'll probably have a nastier day along the Floribama line as far as a shower or two pushing by, but really not expecting much for Alabama.
Let's go to this comment from Jacovia. It's a great name. From the WRBL Facebook page. Hashtag, hey, Jeff, for you, Jeff Baradelli. Will it affect the cruise ship on Cape Canaveral?
Yeah, I don't know which. I mean, so of course I don't know exactly what the timing of that is, but yes, Cape Canaveral is going to see some of the worst weather. I think Cape Canaveral will probably end up registering the strongest wind in the storm because it sticks out in the Atlantic, and it's really, you notice that wind gradient there with the purple making its way to yellow very quickly. That's what land does. When a storm slams into land, the winds go down exponentially fast. So you get the really strong winds along the coast. You could have 80-mile-an-hour winds along the coast. You go 20 miles inland, it's half of that. It's 40 or less. So Cape Canaveral sticks out even further than the rest of the beaches. So they tend to see the strongest winds. And also, it's very wide open space. There's nothing in the way, buildings, trees, such, to kind of curb the wind at all. So I think Cape Canaveral is going to see the strongest winds. I think it's conceivable we'll see wind gusts over 80 miles an hour at Cape Canaveral. So, yeah, I think it'll affect the cruise ships, but exactly how, I'm not sure.
We got Steve from the WFLA Facebook page. What are the chances the Sunshine Skyway Bridge will be shut down for the duration as this storm comes into the area? Guys, will the winds cause closure?
Briefly? Maybe.
Maybe we might have an hour or two where we have those more consistent 40-mile-per-hour winds plus, but I wouldn't expect it to be a day-long event.
I agree.
We'll go to just a handful more. We got a lot of folks joining us with a lot of comments. Maravet Ramos from the WFLA Facebook page. Please help a Jersey girl. Yeah, we can do that. I have to travel to Fort Lauderdale on Wednesday evening from Jersey, then taking a flight out Thursday morning out of Fort Lauderdale to the Dominican Republic. Will I make it? Hashtag DR wedding.
Wednesday evening flying into Fort Lauderdale. I think yes. I think you'll be okay. Yeah, I mean, weather-wise, you should be okay. But again, this is a question of the airport officials, airlines, and such. And there's going to be, you have to fly over a tropical storm to get there. But I don't think they're going to close the airport. So really, I think it's going to be more of a question of, is your individual flight canceled? Is it delayed? But Fort Lauderdale should be far enough away from direct impacts such that it's not going to be a closed airport. So, it's definitely a roll of the dice. Let's put it that way.
Probably a bumpy landing.
Yeah.
Let's go to this comment. Two more in our queue. Becky, hashtags all around for all three of us. How will Nicole impact Lake Okeechobee, if at all?
Gusty winds, you certainly see some heavier winds along the lake, just like you see the heavier winds. They pick up as they go across the lake, so depending on which side of the lake you're on, you may get some stronger winds on the western side of it because of that lack of friction. But I wouldn't expect any hurricane force winds. I would think you're most likely going to see tropical storm force winds and 2 to 3 inches of rain.
And then we've got actually, I lied, we got two more really quickly here. This one is from Karen. What is the status of the Artemis 1 launch? I actually have this on the ready, you guys, so I can take this one.
That's not in the next couple of days, is it?
November 14th,
Right.
I believe, is when the window opens up. So NASA is monitoring it with the U.S. Space Force, the National Hurricane Center, monitoring Tropical Storm Nicole, and of course they're going to make the necessary precautions and put certain protocols into place if they absolutely have to. So right now they're kind of in standby mode, but I mean, really with the window opening. Afterwards, things right now. But people want to know if it's going to roll back. And as we understand it, there has been no decision for it to actually roll back.
Right, so it's out there on the runway. And they have to decide whether or not they want to go through the arduous task of rolling it back indoors.
Which takes a long time.
A lot of labor, as money goes into that as well. So, it's a big thing. And then just also, too, I find this a bit humorous. And you have to forgive me because we're so laser focused right now on Florida. But we'll end out with this comment just to show everybody that we have people watching from everywhere, including Rhode Island. Amanda Garcia from the WPRI Facebook page. Amanda, we see you there on Rhode Island. Don't think that we don't tap into all of our Facebook pages across the country. And Rhode Island, way up there in the Northeast, way up there in New England. And they could see some rain.
Yeah.
They will. Maybe
down
the line, right?
It's racing by them by the time it gets to them. It gets kind of absorbed into a greater front. And so it'll race through the New England states and bring you a little bit of rain. We're sending our New England states some tropical rain.
It's going to be like a rocket ship, like Rebecca was saying. But here's the interesting thing. It's going to produce some snow in the Berkshires. So if you're not too far from the Berkshires, you're only about 2 hours away or so. You can't ski yet, but you may see some snow flurries if you go there.
Yeah, I mean, sounds fun. Let's go.
Hurricane chasing for snow.
I would like to go right now and get out of election coverage.
Okay, well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, not going to happen. No. But appreciate, of course, the expertise of our two meteorologists on stream. Max Fenderay, Chief Meteorologist, Jeff Baradelli, Meteorologist Rebecca Barry, joining us here in the Stream Center in your hurricane headquarters on Tracking the Tropics. We will have our regular Wednesday edition of Tracking the Tropics tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right.
Wednesday, 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central on whatever app, website, or social media platform that you're watching on right now. We are going to be, of course, continuing here in your hurricane headquarters to monitor all the progress with Tropical Storm Nicole, and we expect it to get to hurricane status approximately when, you guys?
Well, it's 60 miles an hour right now, so probably tomorrow morning, I would think.
Yeah, if not the 5 a.m., probably the 11 a.m. Or it's actually an hour different now because of the time change, so it's 10 a.m. and 4
But if there's one thing that we can emphasize and end out on, this is nowhere remotely close to the tier of storm that Ian was.
Right, and it's also hitting directly on the East Coast rather than the West Coast, which makes a big difference around here.
Big difference. All right. Rebecca Barry, Jeff Baradelli, JB here with you live, of course, again in the WFLA Now Stream Center. We will have more editions of Tracking the Tropics as we continue to monitor all the developments with Tropical Storm Nicole. You can go to trackingthetropics.tv for the very latest. You can also follow Jeff and Rebecca on their respective social media accounts. Yeah, give Rebecca a follow on TikTok, right?
Yes, I'm going to post a TikTok next.
Yeah, she's viral. She's viral.
Give her a follow, folks, on TikTok, and we'll see you next time on Tracking the Tropics, powered by Handyman Roofing. Be safe out there, everybody.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.